guess they were wrong.
Was it Mike?
That's a water fountain.
On our part to reach out and broaden that interpretation. This has to be, one of the biggest successes that we've had, in that regard. Where we are, this is called Washington Pioneer Farm. It's a 4-acre area. In Washington's day, this was a swamp. And dredging from the river was dumped in here. Spoils from dredging the river were dumped in here several times over the years. Of course, something we couldn't do today. It's all wetlands, floodplain, all that kind of stuff that we would not be able to do today. But fortunately, they had the foresight to do it before any of those laws came into effect. And so we were looking around for a way to try to bring this element into the interpretation. This element being, everything else. The whole plantation story, really wasn't what we couldn't really talk about. And so the plan here was to try to, in microcosm, because this is, of course, just a tiny little, postage stamp. This is only a 4-acre area, but it was the area that we had available to us. It's not so far from the mansion and the rest of the estate that it isn't easy to get here. It's very accessible. Yet, because it's filled in soils, there's no archaeological concern. Because it's far enough from the mansion, the fact that it's a recreation of something that wasn't here, we felt it was important to have it be far enough away from the mansion that we wouldn't confuse people that this was really part of Mount Vernon in the 18th century. So it's a real departure, for us moving in all those areas. What we've done then is we've tried to, in microcosm, recreate one of those outlying farms. And the barn complex that we see at the end of the field is a reconstruction of a barn and a stable yard, 2 corn houses, and 2 stables that Washington had built at Dogue Run Farm, which is one of those outlying farms that we've been discussing. And this was located about 2.5 miles from here on the interior. Fortunately for us, there's an enormous amount of information about the buildings, including a photograph taken of the barn just before it was demolished, about 1870. And we spent hundreds of hours of time examining that photograph. We digitized it and then manipulated it on the computer. And we were able to count the rows of brick and what kind of windows they had and if there were bars in the windows and just enormous amounts of great details and all sorts of other documentation. So we're very confident that that's about the most authentic recreation that we could possibly have done. So in a sense what we've done is we've taken those buildings from Dogue Run and put them down here in association with these fields in this 4-acre area. And then what we try to do is replicate the crops that Washington raised, and we use one of his crop rotation schemes. Again, this was part of his very innovative, forward-thinking ideas, is that he developed 6- and 7-year crop rotations, as early as the 1760s, when most people in the Chesapeake, if they were doing 3 years, you're lucky. And he was very concerned with fertilizer, as we discussed before, experimented with all kinds of different types of fertilizer, all of that. So anyway, our goal here is to try to give some sense of that. And because it's such a small area, it's so limited in those ways, it's difficult to really give a good sense of what it must have been like at the farms here. But, at least we go through that and we try to accomplish that. This is, because of the work that's done here, this is our best opportunity to interpret slave life at the outlying farms. And so we have costumed interpreters here who do not portray slaves. I mean, that's not their role. They are not a slave. But they're doing field work, and the discussion and interpretation of what the field work was and the fact that slaves would have been the ones doing it is a major part of the interpretation. We are looking to add to this next year. I'm doing research right now to construct a slave quarter that would have been like the ones at the outlying farms. And we're going to do here be a small, one-room log building. And I'll show you where we're planning on putting that when we get to that part of the site. As part of that, we're hoping to majorly upgrade the interpretation of slave life here. Once we have that quarter available, then we'll be able to do some things that we simply can't do at this stage, and be able to contrast, again going back to sort of the theme of this discussion, that slavery wasn't the same everywhere. That the lives of the slaves at Mount Vernon you know, could be very different from the lives of the slaves at some other plantation. And then within Mount Vernon, because of the diversity of the locations and the occupations, etc., you know, that you could see a lot of diversity there. So this will give us an opportunity to really be able to interpret that and talk about some of those issues. Okay?